to the Screwup Exchange. My name is Patrick.
Hi, my name is Russ. Welcome, Gert.
Hey, welcome. Well, it's great to see you guys again. I mean, I'm just trying to think, it's now nearly 20 years since I walked into the MPS office in Untertürkheim, probably a very similar shirt to today, and presented myself to Mr. Thomas and my first group of expert trainees. That was scary. Just as scary as this, by the way.
Do you remember their names still?
Yeah, there was Christian Vogt from Berlin. There was, what was his name? A tall guy with glasses. You know, so it was one of the, it was number 2 of the waves of trainees.
Yeah.
Yeah, I should have thought about that. But
I'm sorry about it.
No, it's fine. Yeah, so there was 16 or 18 very clever Daimler guys, and I was supposed to be the expert trainer. And I thought, whoa, I mean, it's a good thing is this is how you learn about Lean when you have to train it. But that was a humbling experience. But I ended up staying there for, I think, 4, 5, 6 years doing MPS. And then, as you know, I switched to the truck operating system when Christoph Siegel and the team set up in TOS. And then I was the coach and trainer there for a number of years. And I know that we met on projects in Untertürkheim. Patrick, we met on projects in, was it Portland?
It's Portland, yeah.
Yeah, so, and if nothing else, if we didn't work directly together, you probably worked with some of the infamous Toyota guys that work for LeanCoaching.
That's so cool. So for the audience, when you were talking about setting up the Lean Expert Training Program, like, could you explain a little bit more about that? Like what you actually did and some of the methods behind that?
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, it wasn't obvious to a lot of organizations that they needed change agents back in 2000 and before that. And a key part of change management and transformations is, apart from what you have to do with the leadership and the plans and the methods you use, is a key part you have to have change agents. So we convinced Daimler of this while I was still at McKinsey, I think in 99. We started upgrading the Mercedes production system. It was Daimler Chrysler production system before that, starting rewriting it more towards the Toyota methodology. And then we had to come up with a method of training these change agents. And that's basically where we sort of designed the skills matrix around the tools and the system. We designed the program with 3-month projects, like really accelerated projects around the Jishiken type philosophy at Toyota. Yeah, I think, I don't know, when I left Mercedes car group, I think we trained 200 or 300 experts. I guess it's up to twice that at least today. And I think we did a couple hundred in the truck group as well. And you know, the best thing with this sort of thing is when you set something up and you walk away from it, even if it doesn't function completely the way you sort of hoped it would one day, maybe, just the fact that it functions well and it keeps improving, I think that's a great testament of, you know, it makes you feel good, like, well, you know, that's as good as it gets.
You know what a funny thing is, just I remember now our skills matrix that you set up is still signed by Damon Bland.
Well, he was number 2 in LeanCoaching, you know, so I started it, Damon's, and I think, you know, so the first year was only me, and then second year we were 2 people, next year we were 4 people, next year we were 8 people. So it sort of grew exponentially from 2002 to about 2009. So those were the first good years where we worked almost entirely with Mercedes and MPS. And then we switched into the truck group, and then we switched to other industries, but that's a long story.
Yeah, and I'm sure that you have a lot of things that you can provide here about screw-ups then in your long career, right?
Well, yeah, and where to start, right? And I think, I mean, you know, I think, you know, sort of when you say screw ups, right, I think of 2 things. I think of like mistakes and accidents or something. Like an accident is a bit like, I was out running. I don't know whether you can see I have a scrape here. So like, you know, that's a screw up, right? You're not paying attention to where you're putting your feet and you go flying. A mistake is probably more like, you know, you can see something coming, you think about it, you make some assumptions and whatever, and then it either goes, you know, completely right, somewhere in the middle, or completely wrong. And I think that's the type of screw up that we're talking about, right? The mistakes where, you know, sometimes you get it completely wrong and, you know, you're embarrassed and all that. And sometimes you just manage to salvage and you sort of look okay, but you know in your own mind that that didn't go to plan.
Well, it's really interesting discussion because I look at it that is one part of a screw up. That's kind of what I would say is like a learnable screw up. So like you actually have some forethought behind what you think is going to happen. It may not go exactly the same way, but you also have like other screw ups where like, if you think of like a dad or a parent telling a child, don't put your finger on the stove. And if the kid does it, you know, he had the knowledge, he was told not to do it. And then, but that's a screw up. Yes, it's still learnable, but like when you're talking about people thinking and like, okay, I have a plan, I understand this could go this way, like to the low or to the high, but that's like, for me, it's a really high level screw up, the best way I can say it. And then like a child would be like a low level screw up, like you shouldn't do it and you were told not to do it. So I think we have
there's big analogies there, right? I mean, we've talked about this earlier, that the way that the child learns is by controlled and small screw ups, right? So you've always got to evaluate, okay, he might get burned, but the stove is not too hot. So if he does get burned, he'll really learn a lot. Instead, if it's really, really hot, I just have to tell him, there's no way you're going to touch that. Don't even think about it, right? And then, you know, so you're forever measuring the situation, and you're evaluating the outcomes, and then you say, okay, let's give it a go. Let's just use this as a learning opportunity for the child in that case. And that's what's, you know, very similar to learning organizations, etc., what Toyota does.
Yeah, but in that example, you assume that the father is like controlling the stove or is like not going to make it too hot. And I think a lot of what I've learned from my Toyota experience is like it's like a controlled mistake, a controlled screw up. Like, okay, look, I know from my past experience that this has happened 9 out of 10 times, but he will actually get to learn from this. Now, like an uncontrolled mistake or screw up, however you want to call it, would be like there was nothing put into place to safeguard that. Yeah. So.
Well, and that's what I mean, then you're over in the accident territory, right? Then it's just unforeseen, unthought about, and you know, that sort of thing happens, and you have to do what you can to make sure it doesn't. But I think the other, the screw ups, it obviously depends a lot on how mentally, you know, what is your attitude to your child's upbringing? Is it okay that they make some mistakes? Or, you know, do you as a parent feel like you're a failure as a parent if you don't stop them from making every mistake? And I see a lot of parents still that think that they have to stop their kids from every little mistake and give them the benefit of their wisdom. But I think I also see that I don't think that's the optimal learning for the child. You know, if they all the time just do as the parents are told, then all of a sudden one day they leave home and the parent's not there. And I think then they're in a difficult situation, right? So we have to think about our self-image as parents and say, okay, I don't, you know, I can live with the fact that my child or my friends don't think I'm the perfect parent because my child makes small screw ups all the time. But in my mind, it's actually the best way to learn and make them independent.
That's really, that totally agree. So in all your work experience, I think Drosko asked this, do you have any really interesting examples? Because I know we're talking about children and a stove is a very simple example, but like adults are a little bit more complex, and then like you're teaching other adults. So that's a completely different field of training and education and learning. So
yeah, I mean, you know, before we sort of go to my experience, I would say one thing you have to think about, you know, if you're a coach of coaches, and this is what Toyota does really well, if you mix that with situational leadership and you think the coachee I'm working with, is that a complete novice or somebody who is in the middle of the development, or are they really autonomous and they know things really well? And I think that's the first thing you have to be aware of. And then within that scope, if they're just starting out, one, you probably have to help them in the job, and you have to make sure that they're not really making any screw ups, right? So you're testing their thinking way, you ask what they're gonna do, and you think, okay, that sounds reasonable, let's let them do it or help them do it. Whereas in the middle of the, you know, where they're getting more and more autonomous, then that's when you let sort of bigger and bigger potential screw ups get into the picture. And the thing is that I know that you know the article I shared with you, right? If you get up to the really very autonomous level where you're nearly about to be able to be a senior middle manager at Toyota, and you're supposed to be able to coach others, and you haven't really, there's fundamental things that you might not have learned and internalized, they will set traps for you. They will let you make pretty big screw ups just really to bring the humility, the Hansai home to you. And, so the screw ups are of a different magnitude depending where you are on that learning curve.
Yeah, I mean, when I first, you mentioned the article, I mean, I think it was like maybe 15 years ago when I was faced with this article and the screw up. I think it was from Nigel, as far as I remember.
Nigel Waring.
Yeah, and I didn't believe it in the beginning. I mean, no, I don't say that's not really true, but when I was with the years more and more going into deep with this Toyota philosophy, when it was not anymore a tool set for me, but when I started to understand that this is really a philosophy behind it, I heard this examples from a few different people already that they had the same experience, and I think Jeff shared it the last time. And I was thinking there must be something, like you said, it's kind of a pattern.
Well, there is, and one of the reasons why we used that a lot when we were talking in Mercedes, for example, was they started talking a lot about best practice sharing. So if you developed something really good, everybody should share it. There's a term called yokoten where you share it out with other departments, but that sort of became just a way of do something. Okay, this works. Let's copy paste it everywhere, right? Mm-hmm. And the problem that I'm sure Toyota also found when they started doing this was when you copy paste a solution into another area and the area starts using it, there's this syndrome called not invented here. So people think, well, I don't like that. That's the solution from the engine plant when we're in the car plant, or this is from Germany and we're in the US. Copy paste just doesn't really work psychologically. And if what you're trying to do is to get somebody to implement the system, what Toyota have learned, and it's normal in child psychology and everywhere else, is you sort of have to set up the situation so that you say to them, hey, we need this sort of system here. How do we, replenish materials? And then somebody works on it and have 10 different ideas. And guess what? At some stage, they come up with a Kanban, right? As a simple, easy way of doing something. Then they've learned it and it's their Kanban system. And they own it, they improve it. And you as the coach, you say, oh, wow, that's good, right? Knowing full well that that was the solution you were trying to get them to in the first place. So that's what I also say is the difference between coaching and consulting. As a consultant, you'd go in and you'd say, oh, you really need a Kanban system here, right? This is obvious. Whereas as a coach, you go and say, okay, they need a Kanban system. What am I going to ask them? Or what sort of problems am I going to throw their way so that they start testing stuff? And then gradually they either come to the same conclusion, i.e. a Kanban system, or they come up with something even cleverer. We've seen electronic Kanbans, replenishment systems, etc. So it's a win-win that people go through this learning process. But when you think from a Western point of view, most people think that the most efficient thing is copy-paste, best practice sharing. And they completely underestimate to get sustainability of something, you really have to let people invent it themselves and own it. Then it's sustainable, right? Then it stays for a long time. If you copy in a perfect solution, then it's probably gone in 3 months after you left.
I mean, we experienced a lot of this, this kind of approach, copy and paste, because it should be faster than just reinvented the wheel again. This is, I think, a German expression we choose a lot. Oh, we don't need to reinvent the wheel again. Yeah. But at the end, I think it makes a difference if you start to learn, or to learn the learning, right, behind it, how to do some things. And it was interesting. We had like 3 years ago, we had like a best practice sharing conference, and it should be we should develop something new, a new approach on that. And we said, okay, what do we want to do with the exchange? So we said, okay, we want to do a new assembly line for trucks, and we will bring the people to see the new assembly line. And the first thing was what people said, but this is new. We can't compare the new one with the old ones. And I had this in my mind. I said, okay, let's focus on the learning. We share all the examples, but we are focusing on the learning, because for sure, if you have money and investment, you will have a new shiny line. But how did you get to this solution to particular problems? And it was we did it pretty good, that people understand that they should focus on the learning, how they get from A to B, and invest the money in the new process.
Yeah. And you know, that if you ask yourself, why does Toyota do it this roundabout way? It's not because they're hippies. It's not because, you know, they're in pedagogical heaven or something. It's because they, from trial and error over 50 or longer years, have found out this is the most efficient way. This is the most cost beneficial way of doing it. You know, we always talk about most of the Toyota production system is, you know, the tools are actually countermeasures. Right, so the end-on and the Kanbans and all these things are countermeasures, and even temporary countermeasures to a problem that they have. Right, so copying those solutions rather than the process whereby those solutions came about is putting the cart before the horse, as they say. So really, what you have to do is get the horse in front, the problem solving, identifying and prioritizing the problems, and then work towards. And in a lot of cases, guess what? You come up with the same good solution, right? Or you come up with a different one because you're in a different industry. But it's that process you have to copy. And that's what I mean about how you develop managers, change agents, etc. It's also that process of learning to learn that you have to iterate, rather than with best practice, give them finished examples of something. That's just misunderstanding the objective.
So I have a little bit of a counterpoint, because what we are doing is exchanging a lot of information. So like, that's one of our main jobs, is like communication and exchanging information. And like, I have countless people that when I've shared information regarding X, Y, and Z product, I'm not going to go into details, but they've actually contacted me. It's like, oh, I'm interested to learn this to implement in my area. And they're asking for information, they're asking for cost. When you were talking with your Toyota workers in the past, what did Toyota do to share information? Because I know a lot of people want to learn about a problem where they like think, okay, I have this type of problem. I wonder if this has been solved somewhere else, because then they can just, you know, not reinvent the wheel. And I've seen it the other way too. So
and it's so I wouldn't take it as dogma, right, that they reinvent the wheel all the time. Of course they do best practice sharing, the word yokoten again, but they don't take it as, okay, this is something we've got to copy. They take it as, okay, this is a potential solution to my problem. But there's an assumption there that you know what your problem is first, right? And in a lot of cases, when I see digital solutions, hey, we can do this on a screen, whatever, and I said, what's the problem you're trying to solve? It looks really cool, and you know, it's fast and it's colorful. Yeah, but what's the problem, right? You know, so if they do best practice sharing and everybody takes it home, they look at it and they say, okay, this is an idea that might be a solution to my problem. But you know, the process means that they're pretty clear on what their biggest problems are. They will test it. They'll test other things. And if it works out, eureka, okay, we've saved ourselves some time. Or if it doesn't work out, maybe they have another version of it and they put it into their best sharing, best practice pool, and others can maybe use that as an update to theirs. So it's not black and white, like they don't use it, but they use it in a, you know, intelligent way.
Oh, one question is coming in my mind. I mean, why we still have a job? If it's so simple, right?
It's simple, but it's not easy. I think it's because it's counterintuitive. You know, it's when you think about companies, it's about economics, it's about obvious things, so that you have to, unfortunately, most improvement in companies is still driven by financial considerations. People go to financials, they go to cost cutting and things like that very quickly. And you have to justify, what do we do? Where's the money? Show me the money sort of thing, right? And that's problematic, because showing money here and now, first of all, there's a lot of things that you can't quantify. Like, if I increase the training and the capability of my team, what's that worth in dollars or pfennig or whatever, right? I don't know. But it's a prerequisite to be able to save you money later. So there's a lot of things there that are difficult to quantify in money, which keeps us in the situation we're in at the moment. Then there's also things like, career considerations. People would rather be promoted than do the right thing, and. So there's a lot of reasons why for every step forward, we take 2 steps back. There's new graduates coming through MBA programs and engineering courses that don't learn about this, so they have to start learning on the job. And I'm like you, I thought I'd be retired by now. I would have written all my slides and get on with it. But, we're still here and we're still learning. And I guess it's the same with children, right? Every new generation of children, you probably learn the same thing since the age of the Greeks or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So,
but I mean, you mentioned this with Toyota, that the companies need to earn money, right? But so does Toyota too, right? So why is still their approach different? And I saw a few weeks ago, I saw a chart showing the losses and on the automotive industry in the last few months or the half year with this COVID crisis, and there were just three car companies making a benefit. It was Tesla for sure, it was Ford, and it was Toyota, and and so there is something beneficial around that, right?
Well, I think the first point is the difference between short-term money and long-term money, right? Toyota go for long-term money, sustainable incomes. And even, I remember that when they had the crisis was it 2009? They didn't lay off their core people, they kept them. And they actually had a loss over 3-6 months. They kept people, they did the training, they relay out the lines, etc. So they didn't go for the short-term benefit where everybody else would quickly lay people off. And then they would have trouble hiring the same people again, and they would have to retrain, etc., because they don't think that far. So Western companies are caught in quarterly accounts management. I could go on and on, right?
Yeah.
The other thing is opportunity cost. What is the value of a square meter? What is the value of a machine that retains a high OEE rather than just write it off and replace it? So there's all sorts of traps in financial accounting that most Western companies are exposed to, that Toyota sort of think, we look at the principles and that rather than this. And it sounds a little bit hippy-dippy to do that, but encoded in them is 50 years of experience. Then looking at that gives you long-term sustainability and thereby also long-term money.
Cool. Yeah. So what is LeanCoaching doing now? Where are you right now? What are your next steps? Well, and I have another question still that I need to ask you.
Well, I'm in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I live here now, and Cambridge, we have an office here now, as you can see. We have one in Dearborn. We still have the head office in UK, which is where things sort of revolve around. We've been pretty successful ever since we went with Daimler Trucks to Kamaz. So we've had an office in Russia for 10 years now. We work with McKinsey in metals and mining. We do project management, lean in project management. So Patrick, the project that we did in terms of project management, for, the NPI project management for I think it was a new Cascadia or something.
Right.
We've actually scaled that up to how do you project manage developing nuclear power stations. So we did a project with Rosatom with like 10,000 engineers, reactors and turbines, and building the site between, Russia and Finland, which was scary. But, it's the same principles, just on a bigger scale. So we're still busy, but the COVID has obviously put a bit of a break on everything. So but we're hoping to get started again soon.
So where do you see, my second question on this is, where do you see the lean journey in the next few years with all this digitalization and stuff around us?
Well, so I guess I should have plugged that we're collaborating with McKinsey, their digital capability centers on, digitalization. And what I like there is that they still go through they have in the digital capability centers, if you look at the DCCs, they have a setup in a mini factory. So if you remember the process factory that we did, so we started with a Lego simulation, and then we worked up to a proper factory where you could learn the lean principles and SMED and all that. They have this built up to a whole factory with a proper production, machining, assembly, warehouse, office. So they have this in a building, and you can actually go in and you can set up a current state, normal batch manufacturing, and then you can do all sorts of combinations of things to do lean manufacturing. And then you can add on the digital elements, LED assisted assembly, robot assisted assembly, collecting the data, doing SPC graphs. One of the cool things I saw on the screens, for example, is if you start an Ishikawa diagram, it'll do machine learning from all the A3s that you've done in the past. And if you start putting in the problem, it'll already suggest some of the types of causes that you found before. And you say, no, not this, but then this time it's that. Aggregates the machine information, shows you graphs over, is this probable or isn't? So there's some really cool stuff there. But as I say, if you try to go from a bad process to a digital automated process, then it's garbage in, garbage out, right? You just get it faster and you still don't know what it is. So people that are looking with digitalization to fix their problems, sorry, it doesn't work like that. You have to fix your problems. You have to lean out your processes, simplify them. And then, then it's also much more easy to digitalize it when you fully understand and have simplified your processes. I think that's logical to anybody.
Yeah, I think we could do like multiple episodes on that, just like how to map a process and how to get the information that you are required for digitalization. Because like I've seen time and time again, people just digitizing a bad process, and
yeah,
you can do it. Exactly, yeah. You can do it and you'll get the same exact output, but that's not what we're trying to do. Like we're trying to improve the process. So,
well, and we all know that the lean journey is almost endless already, because you have new people coming in, you have new equipment, you have new products, customers, markets, etc. So that there's churning over all the time. And now you have this extra dimension of within the machine side of the 5Ms, you have digitalization, and the digital capabilities are evolving all the time. So you're forever trying to see, okay, we now have this capability. Could that fit somewhere? Or we have this problem. Does that have a digital solution? Maybe, maybe not yet. Maybe a bad one. So, I guess that's why we still have a job, right? The world keeps evolving and developing, and you still have to always keep adapting to what it's up. But that's where it's important to remember the principles, because the principles don't really change, right? You want to make a process flow without Muda, etc. That doesn't change no matter what, whether it's in a digital information format or whether it's physical parts that flow. So that's reassuring.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I think it's a little bit dangerous, that too much trusting against some systems and programs and this digitalization. I saw, for example, a lot of examples of e-shop floor. It's becoming very fancy right now. Yeah. I mean, if you don't understand the purpose, what you want to do with the shop floor management, to start problem solving, to have the right data to start a problem solving process, it could be a really dangerous thing to do a shop floor then, and you just trust that data and you said if it's going shit in, you will get shit out.
Oh, CISO, I have to remember that. Yeah, no, yeah. You're right, we could talk about that for ages. So I guess it keeps us in a job, right?
Yeah, hopefully.
But I think this is a really great ending point. I really want to thank you again for coming on our show. Really appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time, and hopefully we do it again.
Great to see you guys. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Thanks,
Stay safe.
You too. Bye.